Okay, so I'll do it in 3 minutes. I've got my watch here on. So okay, I'll say choosing leaders. Our sages in the Midrash Rabbah in Shmot Parshat, this Parshat second Parsha, discuss criterion for choosing a leader. Hashem doesn't give greatness to a person until he tests him in a small thing. Only afterwards does he elevate him to prominence. There were two outstanding men who were tested by Hashem in small things. They were found faithful and were raised in distinction. Moshe and David were those two people. David was tested with the flock and found, and he was considered a fine shepherd, and that's from Tehillim. He took him from the sheep corrals. David held back the older sheep so that lambs would graze first from the soft grass. Afterwards, he let the older sheep graze from the mid-grade grass, and the stronger sheep were sent to graze from the coarsest grass. Hashem said, "One who knows how to properly graze the sheep, each according to its strength, will come and shepherd my nation." Okay, in terms of Moshe's leadership, Moshe tended Yitro's sheep in the wilderness. One kid goat fled from the flock. Moshe ran after it and found it in a pool of water. Understanding that the kid goat had fled because he was thirsty, Moshe lifted him and carried him back to the flock. Observing this tenderness, Hashem said, "Given your compassion in tending sheep, you will tend my sheep, Israel." It is interesting to note that many biographies of great Torah say in the great biographies of Torah sages and the multiple anecdotes there too, reflect genuine concern about each and every person they encounter.
Let's get started. So, Kevin, well done. You remembered the lesson well. What we're talking about now is one who wounds a Canaanite slave of others is liable to all 5 categories of payment. So there's nezek, actual damage, there's tsar, there's pain, there's refuah, which is medical bills. The loss of employment actually doesn't go to the slave, it goes to the master because he's lost out on that productivity. And if it was an employee working for a company, the employer would get it because he's lost out on the productivity he's already paid for. If you remember, slavery was like indentured servitude that it would have been paid for in advance. Now, what I'd like to ask is, guys, can you just mute yourselves a second because I'm fighting a little bit of background noise. Thanks, guys. And the Tana Kamma of the Mishnah says that all the 5 payments are to be paid if you damage another Jew's Canaanite slave. Rav Yehuda doesn't agree with the Tana Kamma of this Mishnah. For Kevin remembered correctly that a slave is not seen as a Jewish brother, so to speak. So how do we know this? Because any sort of pasuk that you get in terms of payment is used for cross-reference checking. So where do we get the payment for humiliation? We said it's in Deuteronomy, Devarim chapter 25, verse 11, which says, "If men shall fight with one another, and a man and his brother, and the wife of one of them approaches to rescue her husband from the hand of the one who is striking him, and she stretches out her hand and grabs his embarrassing place." So the injury then is purposeful. She's basically grabbing her husband's opponent and humiliating him by grabbing his private parts. Now, the essence isn't to humiliate him. It's in order to render him completely useless, and it will do that, believe me. So in that particular, anything that when you intend to injure somebody, you pay for humiliation, not just an act of humiliation by slapping or spitting on somebody, but to actually intend to injure them. Intent to injure is a humiliating act. So therefore, well, where do we get this brotherly thing from? Because if you look at the beginning of the pasuk, it says, "If men shall fight with one another, a man and his brother." Okay? So obviously, A brother indicates somebody to whom has the potential for brotherhood with Klal Yisrael. Okay, perforce excluded from the law of humiliation is a Canaanite slave who doesn't have the potential for brotherhood. And what does the potential for brotherhood mean? Is that you become family. So a Canaanite slave is obligated in certain mitzvahs, fair enough, but what he cannot do is unite in marriage with an Israelite. Therefore, he will never become blood brothers with his kin, etc. And where do we get this from? We get this from Kedushin 68a. So the Gemara now has to explain the Tana Kamma's ruling, because obviously, what does the Tana Kamma of the Mishnah do with this pasuk? And the Tana Kamma is the anonymous general rabbinic opinion, and the rabbis maintain that a slave is an Israelite's brother with respect to certain commandments, because you must remember both a slave and a woman are exempt from time-bound positive mitzvahs. A woman, because she has to look after her family, and with the restrictions of nida and certain other things, she has her time is obligated elsewhere, and the slave's time is not his own either. And therefore, since they both not that they can't do positive time-bound mitzvahs, but they have no chiyuv, no obligation to do so. So in that case, a Canaanite slave still has to have a bris milah, a circumcision, and do positive mitzvahs that will certainly not time bound if they are. But the one aspect is he cannot break any of the Judaic negative commandments, just like which is incumbent upon a woman. So in that way, there is a brotherhood of sorts. So then on this basis, the Gemara challenges Rav Yehuda's ruling, and it says, look, let's take a practical case. If Rav Yehuda wants to use the word brother to exclude a Canaanite slave, let's just take a case of Eidim Zomimim, that the judges should not kill Zomimim witnesses who testify against a slave. So what happens is these conspiring witnesses said a slave committed a murder, and they witnessed the murder, and then a second group of witnesses said that the Jews couldn't have been there in Johannesburg to witness the slave murdering someone because they were on holiday in Cape Town, and they saw these conspiring witnesses. So we're saying to Rav Yehuda, what do we do with conspiring witnesses that attempt to accuse falsely a slave? Because if you look at the pasuk, it says, "You shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother," which implies a brother only an Israelite. But we find that that's not, in fact, the halacha. What happens is Eidim Zomimim, whether they testify against a Jew or a Canaanite slave, they are still subject to the reciprocal penalty. The penalty at which they try to get this innocent victim condemned of is done to them. So too, we learn that if they intended to have a slave get corporal punishment of lashes, lashes are done to them. If they intend to accuse the slave of inadvertent killing, they go to the city of refuge, because that's what they wish to do to the Canaanite slave, and so too with the death penalty. So this is a proof against Rav Yehuda, because the Gemara is saying, well, they are treated exactly Eidim Zomimim, what you intend to do to your brother will be done to you, okay? And therefore, a Canaanite slave is treated as a brother, okay? You shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother. So now,
Damon, can I interrupt you? Damon,
yes.
Sorry, one question.
Yeah.
Can Canaanite, firstly, Canaanite slaves, just Canaanite people, can they be Eidim Zomimim? Do they qualify?
Okay, that's an excellent question. We're going to address it. We are going to address it, but at the moment, what we're dealing with is, can people testify against them? Because the major proof is Rav Yehuda is saying that they're not our brothers. From the pasuk dealing with the issue of humiliation of two men in a bar fight. So it's saying in that place, when two men quarrel, a man and his brother. So he's saying a Canaanite slave is not one of our brothers. And the response to that from the Gemara is the Tanna Kamma is saying that just like a woman is incumbent upon certain mitzvahs, a Canaanite slave is the same. So therefore, he is a brotherhood of mitzvahs. Absolutely, just not time bound because the time is not his own. So that's a proof against. Well, that's a refutation by the Tanna Kamma in our Mishnah against Rav Yehuda. But the other problem is that Gemara is now saying to Rav Yehuda, you want to say a Canaanite slave is not our brother. And if you look at the laws of Adam Zomamim, you shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother. We can see that we apply the reciprocal payment penalty to Adam Zomamim if they testify against the Canaanite slave. So why would we apply, Gavin, the reciprocal penalty to Adam Zomamim against the Canaanite slave if he was not our brother? That's exactly the proof, because the halacha is we do apply the reciprocal penalty. Okay? So how does Rav Yehuda answer it? Guys, do you remember? I will address your question now. It's a great question, Gav. We will address it.
How does Rav Yehuda answer the question of the...
Yeah. How does he answer that the Adam Zomamim get the reciprocal penalty? Exactly what we're going to do against a Jew with false testimony. They still have the Adam Zomamim penalty done to them if they testify against a Canaanite slave. So he's treated like a brother. So this is an argument against Rav Yehuda. What does Rav Yehuda say? We dealt with this on Saturday night. You remember, guys?
Now I'll take maybe then there's there's obviously the switch between Rav Yehuda and you say Rav.
No, the Tanna Kamma of the Mishnah.
Tanna Kamma then considers Canaanite slaves like Jews, like brothers, and there's no distinction. If the Adam Zomamim are going to get the reciprocal punishment for conspiring against the Canaanite slaves, then it's if they were doing it to Jews.
No, but that's the Tanna Kamma's opinion. And it's saying that that's exactly the proof. The proof of the halacha of Adam Zomamim that applies to Canaanite slaves is exactly the same as how it applies to our Jewish brothers. Therefore, what is Rav Yehuda's defense? Because he's saying that Canaanite slaves are not considered as brothers. That's why he says that they're not subject to payment for humiliation.
Well, maybe Adam Zomamim, what they're still doing is not straight and not honest, even though it may not be to Jewish people. So
Exactly. So the pasuk says exactly in concept, like what Kevin says. Rabba said in the name of Rav Sheshes, the end of the self-same verse states, and you shall destroy the evil from your midst. So that indicates that the guilty witnesses are subject to Zomamim penalty in all circumstances, even when they testify against a slave who is not a brother. Exactly as Kevin said, they're corrupting the justice system, and that's why they get such a hectic penalty. So Kevin, well remembered. All right, guys, you got to pull up your socks now to keep up with Kevin.
No, this is doesn't happen often.
Well, it's
Damon, if you ask Arthur a question before the end of the show, he'll sleep on it. So he'll give you an answer tomorrow.
He'll sleep on it now. All right. So let's. We're going to answer Gavin's question. Gavin, it is going to come as an excellent question, but let's just go in the order of the Gemara a little bit. So, in fact, Gavin, it's such a good question. That's why I don't want to answer it out of context, because it's the context is what makes it interesting. Okay. So the Gemara challenges the Tanna Kamma now. And it says, according to the rabbis who included slaves in the classification of brother, since they're obligated in many mitzvahs, a slave should be eligible for the monarchy, even though scripture requires that a king be a brother. Okay? Because how do we know this? In Deuteronomy Devarim, chapter 17, 15, that's where it discusses it. So why is it illegal for a slave to become a king of Israel? Anybody know?
A slave because the king has to come from a pure lineage and has to have no blemishes.
Okay, well, he's not a korban where we're sacrificing, where we're looking for blemishes, but you're on the right track. is that he has to come from superior lineage. Now, I can be as frum as I want, but I've only got the schus to wash Gavin's hands. I haven't got the schus to bless the community. And other people that are Yisrael don't even have the schus to wash Gavin's hands. So there is a certain hierarchy of lineage. What were you going to say, Kev? Same as
I was saying, like my late cousin, we lived in Jerusalem, became a Bava Kamma, and he was in the system. He wasn't eligible to marry the Rebbe. He would never ever have married the Rebbe's daughter, and the oak was as from as they ever were, and he wasn't from that lineage. It's just wasn't going to happen, and he was, you know what I mean, like
absolutely
played the game. Yeah,
but there is an exception. If you look at Rav Daniel Brody, my friend, he married Rabbi Bluestein's daughter, Chana, and Chana comes from an illustrious Hasidic dynasty.
Ah.
But Dan was like a player. In other words, he really pulled up his socks, and they saw it, but it's rare. So exactly as Kevin said, you're on fire tonight, mate. So according to your reasoning, if we have a look at it, okay, it is about lineage. How do we know? Because according to your reasoning, the Gemara counters the case of a convert should be difficult for you according to everybody, since even Rabbi Yehuda includes the son of a convert in the classification of a brother, the son of a convert, because that's a full-fledged member of Klal Yisrael from birth. So rather, the reason a convert's son is disqualified from the monarchy is because the verse states, from the midst of your brothers, which indicates that a king must be appointed from the elite of your brothers. So this perforce excludes the son of a convert and a slave as well. Okay? So by adding the word the mist, mist is vampire, so my tongue twisted. So amongst the midst of your brothers, it's saying it's from within the center, the inner circle, such elitism is chosen. Now, if your time is not even your own, and you're not incumbent to even do positive mitzvahs, you certainly wouldn't be eligible to become the king. Okay? And a convert can never be a Kohen or a Levi, but they are our brothers. Okay, especially the son of a convert from birth. So now the Gemara again challenges the Tana Kamma's opinion, because according to the rabbis, which include slaves in the classification of brother, a slave should be qualified for giving testimony. So this comes to Gavin's question that we're going to deal with this section now. So Gavin, very good instinct. Okay, very good instinct. So it's written in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 18, and behold, the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother. So in fact, if we, as Gavin quite rightly said, can apply the Eidim Zomimim for those who testify against the Canaanite slave, why is a slave in fact disqualified for testifying? So the answer is, Gavin, absolutely yes. Okay? Because, why do you think, Gavin? Why do you think? You would probably know if you just think about it. We did this.
But why Canaanite slave
yeah.
Sure. It's going to have to be linked with something like that. Like it has to be a man type of thing. You know.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow.
Kevin, this is contagious. Well done, Kevin.
Arthur, you got to do some catching up. I just seen your ceiling. Okay, good. Your nostrils are much prettier. Okay. No, Arthur, I prefer you. Come on, I miss your face. All right. So listen. So exactly as Gavin said, women, if you look on the 27a in Sanhedrin, women are not eligible to serve as Eidim. And because and so to a slave, very similar reason, Gavin's instinct is that because they're only obligated to not transgress the negative mitzvahs, in that particular case, they're no different to a woman in that they're not eligible to give testament. But we're going to just see how the case unpacks. You guys are very, very sharp tonight. So the Gemara answers, Ula said, you cannot say that a slave is eligible to give testimony because his disqualification for testimony is derived through a kol v'chomer argument from the case of a woman as follows. Since a woman who is fit to enter the congregation in matrimony is nevertheless disqualified for giving testimony, then regarding a slave who is not fit to enter the congregation, is not logical that he too is disqualified for testimony. So in other words, even a woman who's allowed to have bona fide Jewish children and is part of the brotherhood, she's allowed to marry. If she can't even serve as a witness and give testimony, then a slave is not fit to marry a Jew. It's obviously logical that they're disqualified for testimony because they're limited to the same mitzvah observation as a Jewish woman. So Gavin, well answered. Okay, well answered. But now the Gemara is going to attempt to refute the kol v'chomer, because it says, what comparison can be made to a woman who is disqualified for testifying, right? She's not fit for circumcision. Can you say the same about a male slave who is fit for circumcision? It's a good answer. In other words, perhaps the prerequisite for witness eligibility is being fit for circumcision. So you could say that maybe women are more emotional and less rational, whatever, they could be swayed by jury or whatever. This year, in certain circles, would have me lynched. So hopefully nobody's going to really listen to me that far. I can barely get you guys to hear me out. So we safe, don't worry. So we can therefore say that a woman is ineligible for testimony because she's not fit for circumcision, perhaps. A slave, on the other hand, could be qualified to testify since he's fit for and subject to the mitzvah of circumcision. So a male Canaanite slave must undergo circumcision and he must immerse in a mikveh for the purpose of conversion. So that confers upon him a quasi-Jewish status, which obligates him to observe the mitzvahs incumbent upon Jewish women. And that's why the Gemara says you can't make this comparison with a woman, because she isn't fit for circumcision. A male slave is. And therefore, maybe he can testify because he's also subject to the mitzvahs. So you want to refute it again? You can say, look, if you look at the case of a minor, a boy, a Jewish boy, it proves that fitness for circumcision is not the reason for witness eligibility, for he is subject to circumcision, and yet he's disqualified from testimony. Okay, so a minor's disqualification for testimony is derived from exactly the same pasuk as a woman's disqualification, which given the pasuk makes sense because it says the witnesses, men, which implies adult males. Okay, so in that way, that's a rebuttal, because it first says, hang on a second, maybe a male slave can because he's fit for circumcision, whereas a woman's ineligible. And then it's saying, look, you take a minor boy, he can't give testimony. He's not eligible as a witness. So therefore, being subject to circumcision isn't a proof. Okay. So then, what sort of argument, guys, can you think of to fight that? I want to test you guys. Well, if I was watching you, I can't anymore. Guys?
Just repeat the question, please.
Okay.
I need to hear that.
I'm saying, if you look at the case of a minor, it proves that fitness for circumcision is not the reason for witness eligibility, because we first said maybe a slave can testify because he's not a woman. So therefore, a male, it says when men testify. Okay. So therefore, if you take a case of a minor boy and under bar mitzvah age, he's not eligible to give witness testimony, and yet he's been circumcised. So circumstantially, that's not a proof that you're eligible for witness testimony just because you had a brit milah. So what's the argument against that? Guys, it's logical.
The minor doesn't have any legal capacity.
Exactly, Kevin. You're on top form. Is that you can say you can't make the comparison to a minor who's disqualified to testify because of the reason that Kevin said. He doesn't have the capacity because, firstly, he doesn't have the maturity and intellectual capacity to know what's going on. But more than that, that is why he's not subject to any of the commandments, because he hasn't got that maturity. So how can you say the same about a slave who is subject to many commandments, whereas a boy only over bar mitzvah age is subject to commandments? So the case of a minor can't be used as a proof that it's not fitness for circumcision that qualifies one for testifying, since a minor is circumcised, but he's exempt from mitzvah observance, which is maybe the reason for his disqualification, whereas a slave is obligated to mitzvah observance, that he can't break any of the negative mitzvah. So the Gemara upholds the rebuttal of the refutation. The case of a woman proves that the mitzvah obligation is not a factor in witness eligibility, for she is subject to the commandments. In other words, it's saying, but hang on, let's go back to the case of a woman. She is subject to the commandments, yet she doesn't testify. So, so what do we do here? We can't find a way out. So the Gemara says that at the end of the day, Kevin, you frozen. After you frozen, can you see me? Did I
Can you hear us?
Yeah, did I freeze or did you freeze?
Good question. No, you've been moving the whole time. You're not frozen at all.
Okay, all right.
Completely defrosted.
Excellent. So what we were going to say, Kevin, is it says, listen, you can't prove anything because you come back to the argument of a woman and you say, but hang on, there are mitzvahs incumbent upon the woman, but she can't testify. So what do? Keeps going around in circles, the Gemara. That's what the Gemara is saying. So it says the argument repeats itself. In the final analysis, the nature of this one is not like that one, and the nature of that one is not like this one. So what we have is we have circular reasoning here. Okay? So what actually happens here is the argument's going to go on endlessly, because what's the major problem at the moment? We're looking for what's causing the argument is we're looking for the tzad hashaveh. Guys, do you remember what the tzad hashaveh is? Tzad hashaveh. It's the common characteristics. So what are we saying is, look, a woman can't testify. Why? What does she have in common with a slave? Oh, they can both keep positive mitzvahs. Okay, so fine. But then we're saying again, the argument is, but he's not he's uncommon from a woman in that he's been circumcised. And therefore, maybe he can testify. So then you want to take a characteristic between him and a boy that's been circumcised. And you say, no, but a boy can't testify. Why? Because he's not eligible for mitzvah. So you say, then let's bring back a woman who is eligible for the same mitzvahs as a slave. No, she can't testify. So the minute you go according to the common characteristic, it's a circular argument. So now what we've got to do is look at a unique characteristic and then try and see if it's the uniqueness that we're going to derive the argument from. Gavin, you are freezing at certain points and Kevin at another. Am I losing you guys at any point? That's all.
No, you've been
your
consistent picture, audio.
No, it's consistent.
That's fine, because you guys are while I'm here. So let's look at this issue here. Is that I'm going to bring forward a different case, and that's going to basically explain to you what the best thing is to do. Okay? So the thing of it is you're looking at a new derivation here. We're looking at a case of not just the common characteristic, but unique characteristics. The only way we're going to get out of this rabbit hole. So a slave's disqualification for testimony can come from the case of a robber. What are we talking about? Take a robber. A robber is a Jew, just like a woman that's fit to marry an Israelite. So, and yet he's ineligible to testify. Okay? How do we know? Shmot, Exodus chapter 23, verse 1. Do not place your hand with an evildoer to be a thieving witness. So the Gemara says in Sanhedrin 27a that one guilty of stealing is disqualified for testifying. So the Gemara is suggesting the following Kol V'chomer argument. Since a robber who is fit to marry an Israelite is nevertheless disqualified from testifying, then isn't it logical that a slave who is unfit to marry an Israelite is likewise disqualified? So this is very similar to the case of a woman. Again, she can marry an Israelite, but she can't testify. So the Gemara says, well, what comparison can you make to a robber? Because a robber is disqualified for testifying because his actions caused him to be disqualified. You can't say the same about a slave. His actions didn't cause him to be ineligible for testimony, because you can't blame him for his lack of full mitzvah observance. Perhaps then maybe he's qualified to testify. Okay? So now is when we're going to have the game of chess, because it says, with the Kol V'chomer refuted, the Gemara says, let a slave's disqualification for testimony come from a robber, and one of these other cases, a woman or a minor, by the common characteristic teaching. So let me just show you how the whole thing comes together. It's genius. Okay, genius. So let's look at the common characteristics. If you look at a woman, okay, she only keeps the she only has to not transgress any of the negative commandments. She cannot keep the time-bound mitzvahs. A slave also can only not transgress the negative commandments. His time is not his own. So those two have that in common. And a robber can't keep the commandments. Why? Because of his choice. He's chosen because of his wickedness not to. And if you look at a boy, he's not incumbent to keep the mitzvahs, and therefore he can't qualify for testimony. So I'm going to bring forward a case of a slave who doesn't keep all the mitzvahs and is thus unfit for testimony. So when you use all of those together, you've got the common characteristic, but the unique one is the minute you're ineligible for all the mitzvahs, whether it's of your own doing, whether you're born with the fact that the mitzvahs aren't incumbent upon you at that stage, that cancels out your eligibility for testimony. Does that make sense, guys? It's actually quite clever.
Say that again, please.
Okay. So what we are saying is that the robber is your checkmate move in this chess game. Because you're going from the case of a woman saying, oh, a slave and a woman are both bound to keep to not transgress the negative mitzvahs, and they're not obligated for the time-bound positive mitzvahs. Therefore, a woman can't testify. Therefore, a slave can't. And then you say, well, then what about a minor that's been brised? Because it says if men shall testify. So you can say, well, a boy's been circumcised. Maybe this male slave's been circumcised. He can testify. And then you say, no, but a boy can't testify. Why? Because he can't observe the mitzvahs. Why? Because there's a pasuk that said, and men shall testify. And a boy is not a man. He doesn't have the full gamut of mitzvahs like a man. He's only been circumcised, but he's got less mitzvahs than a woman. He's a koton, he's a minor. The reason's given to, he's not mature enough. It's not obligated. Then you go back to the thing is, oh, well then a woman's obligated to the mitzvahs. So then, and she can't testify, because she can't do time-bound, maybe a slave. And you say, no, that's not the case, because he's a man, and the argument goes backwards and forwards. It's only when you bring another male that's incumbent upon all the mitzvahs, as well as having Brit Milah, that can't be used as a witness, and that only other factor is a male that chooses not to do the mitzvahs, and therefore he's struck off the eligibility by being either a compulsive gambler or a robber. And therefore it was his choice. And you're saying, but it's not the choice of a slave. It's not his fault of her own. It's not the fault of a minor. It's not the fault of a woman. So therefore the argument goes saying, not about whose fault it is. It's about what you can achieve. If through either your action or your status or your circumstance of life, your maturity, your sex, the fact that you impoverished and indentured servitude, all of these things curtail your eligibility because you're not able to observe the full gamut of mitzvahs and serve as men who serve as witnesses. And therefore, all those factors together are irrefutable. Does that make sense? All right. So that's pretty good. Guys, let's end of this note.
Sorry, yes. I just wanted to say yes. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. If we mix this with Kevin's, we've got about 5 minutes left, and it's perfectly under 40 minutes. I like to time everything properly, so we're done.
Scar, thank you so much. Well
Scar,
done.
thanks.
Cheers, guys. Nice to see
Arthur,
you.
it looks like you're eating mussels there, Chas v'chalila. Mussels.
No, I'm building muscles. I'm eating Rimon.
Yeah, are you coming out of your shell, Arthur?
7:30 p.m.
No, it's Rimon.
Damon, what do you want? I've got some nice Grenadelle scraps. Can you see it? Look here. Remember the old days, Kevin?
Yeah.
You know
Do you
that
want, I've got some specials on Grenadelles for you, Damon.
yes.
Sorry, Arthur.
And so you pull out your matchbox and you write on the back of the matchbox.
Yeah, a cigarette box. Remember that, yeah. So this you have to edit out, Damon. Yeah.
Those are the good old days.
Arthur, where's your electricity, your light?
We're having load shedding. Oh, I've turned the lights off.
Oh, serious?
So you know what, guys? I want to tell you something as a matter of interest. Okay, you must know this. France turned off all the lights in the Eiffel Tower last week as a mark of respect for the late Queen who passed away. So she must have meant a heck of a lot more to South Africans because we turned off half the country's light
Yeah, exactly.
to follow her passing.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I actually thought that was dumb to switch off the Eiffel Tower lights. If you look at Sydney Opera House, what they did was they projected an image onto the Sydney Opera House of the Queen. That was magnificent.
Beautiful.
To switch the lights off, what's that? It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. I thought that was pathetic. They should have rather put up the British flag.
No, but listen, the French hate the British, so
Yeah.
this is some.
That's why they just switched off.
Yeah, but
But the guy who runs the Avatar was Jewish. He was saving electricity.
But on a serious note, guys, I must tell you something. I've never been a royalist, but I watched the series called The Crown, and I had such respect afterwards for Queen Elizabeth II because she spent her entire life, when I say a servant of the people, all she did her entire life was put the crown before even her family. She took that duty very seriously. She was an incredible monarch, taking going through turbulent times, technology, and keeping Britannia going with that sort of energy. It's absolutely incredible.
So I wanted to add something to it as well, besides the incredibility, if no one came across it. So I think she was the queen for about 15 or 16 odd UK prime ministers, and about 15 or 16 more or less the same American. So she was around from Churchill. She became queen when Churchill came into power. Can you imagine that? To be around from there all the way until Biden, who's a complete incompetent. Just to go through all these periods, it's absolutely remarkable.
But that may be what finished her off. Biden would have finished most people.
No. Unfortunately, I wish it was. It was actually Prince Philip, shame, because he passed away about a year and a half ago, and that destroyed her, I think.
Yeah.
Listen, that was a late husband, obviously.
If ever you want to watch a decent series, The Crown was actually a very, very good series.
No, it does sound good. And after everything I've heard about her and everything, I am actually quite interested to watch it. So I probably will watch it.
Yeah, I could send you the link on BBC.
Is it quite accurate?
Yeah, it really is.
No, it's on Netflix.